Again, you get one PDU after delivery, which will send it out to you as well. So let's jump into this. We're going to be talking about introduction to business value analysis. And this is not, as we know, yes, the webinar will be recorded. So if that bothers folks, let me know it's already being recorded. So if you have to step away because of that, I completely understand. We'll be sharing the recording and the slides with everybody who registered. So value is a very difficult topic. It's got a ton of nuance. It's got a ton of texture. It's got a ton to it. But we're going to try to dive in and really get at the core elements specifically for the demographic of the audience here, which is vast majority of folks are in complex and complicated projects, software projects, system projects. Most are probably using Agile or a hybrid Agile or hybrid safe. So we'll definitely talk through some of those elements as well. So in the presentation, we're going to talk about value first. What is it? Then I'm going to get into value management. And you'll see that there's no clear definition of who owns value. Then we'll talk about the skills and behaviors needed for value management. That's a fun section. And then my pet peeve, or the thing I'm really passionate about, is the idea of the future state analysis associated with value management. I am going to talk about a little bit like of CX, customer experience, and I'm talking about EX, which is employee experience, which ties back to internal customer experience, employee experience. A little bit of UX stuff, but a lot of you know about UX and wireframing. That's what a lot of you are really good at. But I want to make sure we got some thoughts associated with this idea of customer experience, CX. So what is value? Type in some thoughts, perspectives that you might have as you think about it. What do you think it is? Interestingly enough, there's an entire study of value called axiology, the study of value. There's a phenomenal, great courses class called Questions of Value. And if somebody wants to quickly Google that and put it into the chat here, Peter Grimm is the instructor. It's an amazing journey through all elements of value. He does get into economic value, customer and user perceptions, Rebecca. Absolutely. Perceptions. I like the fact that it used that word perceptions. So this is something worth paying for. Yes. It's something that has value. And what does that mean? Something that you would be willing to exchange something else with or for. Does your initiative provide a better customer experience? Now you're starting to think about it. Great. Your mind's getting into this idea of value. So when I look at defining value, sometimes that's something that's important to there's an importance to it. Okay, that's good too. When you think about value, we can take a step back and think about economics. So economics is really the study of making decisions. The study of making decisions. And that could be decisions across the wide spectrum. When you get into something called behavioral economics, that's when you get into the study of value tied to those decisions. And what we have to realize is value, as we talk about, is deep and it's rich. So it's about trading something for something back. Am I willing, AKA, to give my hour of time to participate in this web seminar? You find that this topic was valuable enough for you to initially engage and be a part of the web seminar, right? At some point during this, you might not find the value in it. And at that point, you will leave because the value, what you're getting for what I'm talking about and what others are sharing doesn't equate to the time that you have to provide to engage that. So when we talk about value, we want to talk about it in terms of engaging something. And this idea of the bullet point 3, the relative worth, the relative utility, the importance of it. Okay, I'm willing to buy that ice cream cone because it has a certain value to me. But then am I willing to buy the second ice cream cone? What value does that have? Maybe if it's buy one, get one free, or maybe even with buy one, get one free, that second cone doesn't have value based on the weight gain that you'd have associated with it. Even though it's delicious and you love it, it's the best flavor ice cream you can possibly imagine. Now, let's get deeper. Look at that last bullet. There's values associated with ethics and morals and what we believe in. What we the Stewart's ice cream. I know Stewart's ice cream. Gosh, I lived on Stewart canned sodas as a kid for sure. Like that brings me back, Charlene. I love it. So this idea of human values is very important because deep down we have certain values. Sometimes people call it certain lines that they won't cross. That means at a certain point, there are things that you just won't do because they affect those values, not necessarily something tangible, as we talked about above, but something intangible related to what you see as your self-worth. Values and worth tie back to self. So I have values and I have beliefs that's based on my worth, and my worth to engage something. There's an exchange for that. And I'm only going to engage it if it's got the same value as it relates to it's worth my time, not only in the utility I get back, but I engage that company, that product, that brand, because they connect with me and what I believe in. And I'm willing to share my time, money, my Yelp review to that. So you don't have infinite amount of time to be able to process this. But as you practice this, it's as simple as going to the grocery store and looking at questions of value about what you buy and why are you buying it. Or when you go into the department store and you're looking at specific clothes, thinking about why you're buying this and why you're buying that. If that's the practice side, when you're looking at shows to watch, when you're looking at books to read, why are you doing it? What are you doing to engage? As I joke a lot about me being a larger person. So I engage certain foods I like, even though those foods may impact me from a health perspective. So there's that level that we have to be looking at. Or maybe I won't go to that store because I don't like what that store represents from a values perspective. And I know I spent a lot of time on this slide, and I hope there's been some sense to it. But economics, you're making decisions. Behavioral economics, you're making value judgments. And those value judgments can cross over business, psychological, moral, ethical. And when we get into our conversation, because this is a business conversation, really we're looking at value from a lens of three areas. Okay, are you going to stay out of jail? Or is your CFO going to stay out of jail? So you have a value element about compliance. Although some people judge this differently and they are willing to achieve better returns and cheat, and then ultimately see if they're going to get caught. That's a value. I value making money over value meeting these issues, meeting these rules. I mean, a lot of folks do it with the IRS related to what they claim and what they don't claim. And then they gauge the risk analysis tied back to the value they achieve. Then value for companies is profit and cost savings. And I separate them. They are very separate, especially for SDLC professionals, because saving costs is a lot of what you folks do. You automate and you update processes, you update systems, you make systems do better things for internal customers. So in a lot of cases, you make your internal customers more productive. Productivity is a profit thing. It drives profits because you get more return out of those that are working, so you don't have to hire more people. Automation is a cost savings tool, but really it's a profit tool in the fact that it drives reduced costs in people. But also you do a lot of the work, some of you, as it relates to external systems that generate revenue. Because no matter how productive or how efficient you or how automated you make a system, there still has to be some type of money coming in or barter exchange if you're doing that from a value standpoint, which is a little harder to do. And then finally, you have this idea of now you're talking more intrinsically about the fact that you have to meet a certain social obligation. You put an idea of, I want to do this for the rest, for the world, or this for a subset of group of people, or I'm doing this to help people get better, grow. Tom's shoes, or the additional shoes, the sock companies and the additional socks. And this is where the big push for B Corporation comes in, B Corp. So you know about S Corps and C Corps. Those are accounting terms related to how you count the beans and how you tie back to your profits. But B Corp is about the societal view of what a corporation should be and whether a company should be committed to being a B Corp. Don't hesitate to look it up. And if someone finds it and wants to share it in the chat, I greatly appreciate that. But so you're now processing and thinking about what you're doing as it relates to value. And go back to your households. Each one of you has a complex business. A complex business is your household. And each one of you are making decisions. Some of you might be doing work outside of your main job because you want to drive more revenue into your business, and that's a value. And so you'd rather not, relax at home because you value the revenue you're getting from doing extra work. Some of you basically volunteer for trade associations. So you value that. And you value that trade association over, staying at home, and you're valuing it over making additional revenue with that time. And that's part of your household situation. Some of you may give to charity. So there's a certain amount of pool of money. Maybe you give time and talent to charity, not just money. These are all questions associated with value, and you're making judgments. And the thing is to be attuned to it, because ultimately you want to debate, am I doing the right thing? Maybe you should take that time from the trade association and make extra revenue based on the current status of your kids at school and where your kids are going to school, or if they're going to college. Maybe you've been through a very stressful period of time and the value is to decompress. So you should do neither of those things and be at home relaxing with your family. And there's a value return on that. Longevity, time with grandkids, so much to consider in here. It's so much fun. And I don't want you to get lost in the weeds of what I'm talking about. What I want you to do is come back to the center of, I'm making decisions. I'm making decisions on value. Now come let me think about the value in those decisions for optimal outcomes. Now let me take that over to my world of work, and let's see if I'm making proper decisions for ultimate outcomes based on the output I'm doing. And that's where we're going to transition into. So we talked about this, and look at that bottom bullet. And I hope I spelled it right because I added this bullet today. And if I didn't, I do apologize. One of your biggest frustrations in the world of work, complex projects, even if you work for a small company, is that value is defined by somebody demanding something. And there's no rationale. Actually happened to us here recently as a company, SoftEd. And that is very frustrating because you as a component within the environment didn't have a way to participate in that value definition. This happens a lot. There's not much you can do to control that, but remember, value can be defined by somebody demanding something. And if they have the authority position to do so, that happens. Now, is that correct? What we're going to talk about is no, there's a thousand risks associated with that. But again, you have a value decision to make then related to, if you're working for a company that this is happening, you believe the decisions are poor, then you need to move to another situation that's going to be better for your longevity and your health and your financial safety. But these are all things we're looking at here. You want to be looking at measurement of financial performance, revenue generation, productivity enhancement through cost savings. All right, let's look at the return on some activities that we've done. You could specifically focus in on, hey, I've been doing this for a while. Like, for instance, I've been doing a lot of these sessions for a while. So now we're going to gauge and see what the return has been for the business associated with me doing these sessions. Hours worth of time, plus it's some preparation. And, there's also value in the fact that I like it. So I got to watch out for that. But does that tie back to why I'm getting paid? I possibly could, because then I stay with my experience and they get someone like me at this job. That might sound arrogant, but that's the thought process is I come with a lot of experience. So there's some other things of value that they might be willing to deal with to get that experience. You got that measurement of environmental and social sustainability. It goes back to the concept of the B Corp and how companies may end up being able to support some of the societal changes that folks are looking for. There's a lot, especially around climate change that companies are looking at. Companies like Microsoft will buy certain allotment of protected rainforest in Southeast Asia to offset their carbon emissions with their computers, data centers, et cetera, et cetera. Remember, questions, comments, thoughts, ideas, maybe an example of what you ran into associated with this. You're like, oh my gosh, I made the decision, Dave. I could see what I did. And this is great. It's bringing that back up. Love to see that in chat as well. Again, if someone can look up the questions of value from great courses, I'd love if you could add that in the chat. And if someone wants to look up B Corp, I'd love that if someone could add that in the chat as well. So now we're going to come to the management side of this. What is value management? So what we have to look at is who is deciding what is considered valuable and why. Value has a huge political component, Charlene, and that's part of an understanding that when you work for the government, you got to deal with the fact that will change based on the political winds. And how does that affect you for working in that environment? There is Caitlin, thank you for adding the B Corp concept. I really appreciate that. Again, just another element of value that you could look at. And does that align with you? But value management is when you're in a given situation. Now let's go back to the work side of things. Based on your point of work, are you considering value within the point of work? So the question should be, how are you creating value? So how am I creating value right now? And are you creating value with that how? So how am I creating value? I think I'm creating value by engaging with a community of professionals that tie back to the demographics of people who would buy soft ed classes. All right, that's how I believe I'm creating value to have an impression on you that at some point you would look at soft ed for some of your training needs and see if we have what you need. Now the question to ask, am I actually creating value with the how? And that comes back to measurement of engagement from you folks, feedback I get, and ultimately do folks then re-engage the company? And so that's part of value management, is looking at that aspect of work, looking at the output that you're doing, and does it register an outcome that you're trying to achieve from your perspective, and then from the perspective of what you're trying to achieve from those around you. Because I might perceive I'm creating value, but maybe I'm not. Maybe I'm not. This goes back to 360 evaluations, because one folks said it here, intangible, the first perception. I forgot which one of you said perception. Let me go back to the top, because I really want to dig into that real quick here. Perception. It's coming up here. Where is it? But anyways, perception is important because that's an element of value that's really hard for us to understand. Rebecca talked about it, customer and users perception. Perception is hard because all of our perceptions are different. So as you start getting into value management, what we talk about in product marketing per se is that we want to get into the shoes and think like the customer, to understand elements of how the customer is going to process things. So as part of value management is if you have internal customers, you're as business analysts, and a lot of you are business analysts, you should be, and I think a lot of you do, putting yourself in the feet of those that you're serving, especially the ones that are engaged the system or the process, to get a sense of their perception. Now, sometimes you have to change perception in the course of a project to create new value, but you have to understand that. That's part of change management. So change management realizes that I'm going to have to change perception and change behaviors because I want to change the trajectory of the company. But I have to make sure that I know what the current state perception is before I can understand how I can create value to change that perception. What I'm asking for, and as I'm throwing all these things at you, is my goal is that I want you to start thinking about this instinctually. And I hope I spelled instinctually right. And if I didn't, I apologize. Spell check on PowerPoint is the worst thing on earth, and I am the worst speller on earth. So anyways, getting to the point that this could become more instinctual. You get into the flow of thinking about this, and that helps you be able to gauge your decision-making faster. Oh, wait a second. Let's go step back and think about this for a second. Oh, let me step back and think about this for a second. I had a choice between preparing more for these slides today or picking up a friend to share some time in the office I haven't seen forever. I picked a friend. Why? Because I haven't seen him in so long, and I knew I had a decent knowledge of the things I was covering today, so I wasn't so freaked out. Now, if this was a newer presentation, I might have decided to ask a friend to take an Uber instead of me going to pick them up. So I'm thinking about this. So it's not a role. There should not be an anointed queen. I anoint thee, Queen Elizabeth, to be the valued person. That's why when we go back to the slide about the owner, the sponsor dictating value, it's a very bad thing. Because values, the best value determinant in chaos and complexity is multiple people coming together. The wisdom of the crowd scenario. And I listened to a great NPR podcast. Andrew, thank you so much, Andrew. I appreciate that. I'm telling you, it's worth the money. Grim is an interesting cat, but it is worth the money. You can skip through different CDs, but the story about the Ford Pinto, the story about this is the great courses, questions of value. The story about how the National Transportation and Safety Board determined the cost of a life. They put a value number, a financial number on a life. And the logic that was done there, it's crazy stuff. Now, I have to tell you, people, the government does have a value of each of our lives. And it's not individually made. It's a constant. So, in project and product environments, what we want to do is we want to get value mindset instinctual at whatever level I'm participating in. And my hope is that does a doctor cost more than a teacher? No, Jennifer, they make it consistent. And that's what they did with the Ford Pinto example. It's interesting, but I don't know if you'd like what the number is. That's the real concept. You know, what would you say right here? What would be the value of a human life? What number would you put on it? And that's a tough one. And we all have different ranges, coming from different perspectives. But it's also kind of an icky feeling when you talk about that. The ick, as you just said, Jennifer. So it's not a role. All of us in knowledge work, in complex and complicated environments, must be wearing our value analysis hat. I will tell you, really, at almost every moment you're working. And you're thinking about that. So everybody is responsible, but then does it get diluted? Yeah, possibly. Do we lose sight of initiatives? Possibly. Are we not being able to monitor it? Remember, when something's not being able to monitor, then you can't manage it. And if you can't manage it, does it even exist? The limited definition of value, as we went through. So there are some distinct challenges here. And that's why I like to dig into this topic by talking about ways you can practice the skill and think about the skill. And I would start off with that circle, right? Am I saving money? 4. I'll do a square. Saving money, making money, compliance, or a social good in business. If you can work through that element of it, then ultimately, as you start moving down the path of one of those 4 elements, you can start measuring if the outcome is the output and outcome that you're doing actually creates the value that you defined in one of those 4 bullets. So that's a starting point. But understanding that your sponsors, your stakeholders, your customers have different perceptions. That's why I love this concept of companies having some shared values and some shared goals, because then at least you have a filter for the different perceptions. There's a connection to all those perceptions in those value statements that you can make determinations associated with. And if there's appropriate goal setting, then as you're going through your value analysis, you have the ability to actually map it up against those goals. So if someone's going off the reservation, diluted, lose sight, you could go back and tie back to those values, the value of the department, the values of the team. This goes back to behavioral, goes back to moralistic values, and then the goals of the specific project. So what we're looking at here is you have expert value analysis. At the ultimate scenario, someone has to make decisions. That doesn't mean they have to make dictatorial decisions, but they have to make decisions. Your hope is that the CEO of your organization understands deeply questions of value and that they're filtering it based on things that align to you. From my perspective, the number one goal for a CEO is to look at sustainability, not just earthly sustainability, but business sustainability. If you go to my LinkedIn profile, my belief is that every business should be run as a profit. Even a nonprofit needs to be run at a profit. It's just what you do with the money. And that builds trust for sustainability for both those that work for the company and those that provide services to the company. Trust. So that sustainability aspect. So, I might not take as big of a risk over here because I don't know for sure if that's going to help us be sustainable, but I'm going to work with the organization to see if we could take some other risks over here. And then I'm going to pull in information from the team through all these levels, because there should be a rich information flow, a value stream of value, if you will, that ultimately gets up to those making that final difficult decision about what pivot to make. And guess what? You are all the CEOs of that business I talked about. The household business is a complex business. A lot of your households bring in significant income from multiple sources. And, you might be the co-CEO with a partner, or you might be the sole CEO of that business. So you want to gather information. You may have an accountant, you may have a financial advisor, you may have a friend who talks to you all the time. And then you ultimately have to provide from business stewardship. So at different levels, you're going to be a different depth that you go into. At the business stewardship level, that's where we're just working. We're doing our job, we're working away, we're making things happen, all's good, and we're figuring out where our value points are in the work that we're doing. Now, at some point, someone has to look at the totality of the different things going on and make sometimes they're actually more generic decisions across the wider view, directional decisions, marketplace decisions, risk decisions, questions of value associated with risk. But ultimately, at each level, you're trying to maximize that which you're trying to achieve. I'm saving money, I'm making money, want to be in compliance, or I want to do a social need. Now, some of those you could do together, but not all of them can you do together. So looking at the map here, within our project teams, we are doing business value stewardship. After we get above the project team level and getting into portfolio views, program views at the organizational level, then you're doing some more in-depth value analysis. So when I owned the company ASPE, I had to do that expert level. I had to do that business value analysis at the enterprise level, at the organizational level. So I had to make difficult decisions where, the team underneath was doing and driving value, but that value in terms of the opportunity cost may be so impactful that even though they were creating value, it might not be what the entire enterprise needs going forward. And that's where the incongruencies lie. This is where the frustrations lie. And this is where the lack of communication lies. People at that lean portfolio management level and then going into the expert value management level need to do a more succinct job of articulating and communicating decisions on value. The Capital One folks who just got let go from the Agile organization, there was a decision of value made, and that was that properly articulated. You don't have to believe in that decision, but was it properly articulated and communicated to a level of understanding? I don't know the answer to that question, but those are decisions that have to be made because there's probably a ton of teams within that decision that were operating at a high level of effectiveness and efficiency and providing significant value at the business value stewardship level and maybe even at the program level. But then at the enterprise level, there was a different view from a generic standpoint that would cause that level to be adjusted and impacted. And what we see now on value is that we brought this thing Agile in. And what Agile did is at the business value stewardship level, it helps us make adjustments to decisions that were made so that we do that decision at the highest level of return possible. That Agile, when done appropriately, or adaptive when done appropriately, allows you different points of time to re-predict the future, to re-gauge the future. An example of this is at ASPE, the company I was talking about before. We had a budget, a year budget, and inside that year budget was some high-level plans, but I planned in quarterly increments. The actions, the marketing actions, some of the sales actions, some of the partnering actions that would occur so that I could better protect myself from shortening the cycle of bad decisions. There's some risk in that. It's myopic thinking. It could be short-sighted. You're not looking at the bigger picture. I'm too deep in business value stewardship. I'm not deep enough in expert. And I had to weigh that. And I had people who would debate me on that. I had salespeople measured on the monthly level instead of the quarterly or the yearly level. Again, there's some challenges with that. But each one of those allows you to readjust. The tighter you get, it allows you to readjust. We just started implementing a continuous planning meeting to account for this. Great job, Rebecca. You're looking at, you want to take a snapshot just to, it doesn't matter what you call it, just to relook at the future, reassess the future and see, are things where you thought they were, because that big word there, emergent requirements, whether it's your household system, whether it is your, work situation, you are going to get emergent requirements. Things are going to change. Now, this is a Scrum picture. And my beef with Scrum is that it doesn't really have a system for enterprise analysis. There's an assumption that that's done, and then what is needed is put into the system, and then we're going to make sure that what is needed is built to the best possible need, or if that need adjusts during the time it's in the system, then we'll adjust it. And this is value stewardship. The Agile Scrum system for project management, Scrum for project management and software development, is all about value stewardship within something that was decided. And we as a project community have gotten significantly better in delivering value. You know why I know that? At the stewardship level, because of the profit numbers of some of these big companies, because of the hiring of some of these big companies. They're hiring project management professionals. They're hiring software development professionals. They're hiring business analysis development professionals. So at that stewardship level, it's working. And regardless of what chaos report is going to come out to, it's working. And here's the last thing that I could tell you. Looking at analysis, the outsourcing trend for this type of work is basically dead. Yeah, you outsource some programmers here and there, but it's not what it used to be, what it would look like it was going to be in the early 2000s as it related to outsourcing both the coding work as well as the project work. Yeah, Aaron, what I'm trying to get at here and what some of the other slides are going to get to is the fact that we have to start looking at enterprise analysis as being something different and something lacking and something that we have to get our hands around and something that organizations have to get their hands around because it's not being done at the COO level like you would think it would be done at the COO level. There's just too much to worry about. Then when you get into the departmental level that a COO will have to drive, it's too stovepiped. And there's challenges here. You know, this is where the world of a potential internal group of management consultants come in. This is where business architecture comes in. And we won't go too deep into that. But I want you to be thinking about that and reminding yourself that, yeah, we're doing a great job if we're doing iterative, even if we're doing waterfall, we're reassessing things. But we're doing it mostly at the stewardship level. Now, some of you are doing at the higher level program using some of your own techniques and maybe a little bit of the portfolio, but it stops. There is the missing link is the analysis necessary about what you're going to do next to make that portfolio more valuable. Great shares, Aaron. Thank you for keep going on that one. So what time we got here? So we got some time still. So we're going to get into decision-making skills and behaviors. All right. So we're going to jump into that. So what we want to be thinking about is the fact that it's in every role. So these are a whole bunch of different roles. So it's not a matter of what I am. It's a matter of what I'm doing in what I am. So how do I fit my analysis work, my value analysis work, my value analysis, my thinking within the context of the work I'm supposed to be doing? Decision making. So we've seen it all. Now look at Pamela talks about we were starting to make this change at my organization, realizing the gap missing enterprise analysis. Fantastic. Pamela, it's so exciting to hear. We're going to talk about some tools you can look at. Decision making is tough because there's a lot of complexity. And look at that first one. No decision is still a decision. It's still a decision. Decision to do nothing. So you have all these different methods, and some of you might have other methods as well. I like some of the consensus-driven methods as it relates to the flow of a facilitated session, although some people will complain about that because they didn't get enough time to process and think what was going on based on the facilitated session. Range voting can be really powerful as it relates to, dealing with majority rules and working within the larger context of folks. But I do think just in time at the consent level is a powerful tool. Do we agree? Does this make sense? Do we agree this makes sense? Okay, we don't agree. Who doesn't agree? Why? What are the steps we're going to do to see if what we have to change to get ourselves in agreement? There are times that you have to make a decision at the point of which you do your work. We all do that. There's nothing wrong with being the dictatorial person as it relates to the point of which you're doing work. But also, most of you are probably going to ask other people when it gets into a tight question of value. So even though you're going to making an individual decision, when it gets into complex questions of value, you are going to go back and talk to folks. It's just natural, especially in thoughtful, intelligent professionals, knowledge workers, because they just understand the risks. So these are some of the decision-making approaches. Most likely you're using all of these in one shape, fashion, or form. Smaller the company, the more it's going to be individual based. Larger the company, you're going to get into range and consent based in a lot of cases. But you just have to watch out for, dealing with, in this consent model, dealing with folks who didn't have enough time to process and have enough time to really think about it. And what's your ability and consent base to bring that back around without slowing down the system? And this is decisions, maybe because of certain scenarios, that person, even though they say that, they've never come out with a value attribute worth waiting for. You can make that decision. That's a value decision. Now the key is, will that person leave because they don't feel valued? That's a risk you have to take. Every decision is a risk. Let's go back to that. I forgot about this. In economics, everything you do has an opportunity cost. Meaning if I do A, I lose out on doing B through Z. I do A, I lose out on doing B per Z. Think about that. But guess what? I do A and I lose out on the infinite -1 of what I could do. Every decision has an opportunity cost. That's part of the mental risk management and value decision making. But that can't make you frozen. You just have to understand that opportunity cost and accept it and keep moving forward and not hide from it, because you have to make decisions. And when you do consent-based, look for an out loud yes, not just a nodding of a head. The airplane, when you're sitting in the emergency rows, the flight attendant will ask for a verbal yes. I love that. Eye contact, verbal yes, because you can protect yourself from dissenters later on. Okay, great comments, great thoughts. Continue sharing. When we look at business value analysis, we have to see that it's in two different worlds. We talk about discovery a lot, and that's a lot of fun. A lot of us think discovery is the fun part. I'm going to look and see and find and think and wax philosophically, as David's been doing here, related to emotional values and moral values and ethical values. But then you got to do it. You actually have to. Can you do it? As an external product manager, I would call this organizational capability. I would look and see, I have this great idea for making money, but can we actually do it? What's the cost of doing it? So a business capability analysis, business analysts out there know this. As you start looking at all those that are involved in making something happen, where are they at? What color are they? And then ultimately, maybe this is not even possible. Maybe everything's red. This is important, especially internally. Because one of the, especially not only for internal projects, but sorry, I missed that, but also with a lot of people involved. You don't want to miss things. And so having this mapped out in this way to start looking at your organizational capability to do some of the things you're thinking about. This is especially important as you start getting deeper into enterprise analysis. Just being able to have a business architecture, understand that business architecture, understand the high-level systems that incorporate that business architecture, and to make sure you can look at it across stovepipes is very important. Now, as a business owner, I could do that with a 50, 60 person company, $13 million. It's easier to do than a $2 billion organization with thousands of different people, multiple departments, multiple stovepipes. So being able to get some mapping associated with that architecture of the business, the systems that are currently there, can be proved to be very valuable. And when this gets done right, you might find yourself in a situation that your enterprise analysis becomes, maybe we should sell something to the general public. Amazon. Amazon had a capability that was storage for all the vendors and the pictures and the comments for all the stuff they were selling. Well, wow, we can actually sell this to other people. Poof, look what happens. It's basically the profit of Amazon Web Services that keeps Amazon prices low. That's the sneaky secret of Amazon, is it survives because of AWS. So you have to start building in these critical thinking skills. And I talk about this in a lot of presentations I do. Are you practicing your critical thinking skills? Are you looking at the way you think? Are you testing your way of thinking against other ways of thinking? And that's done through communicating with different people. That's done through reading dissenting documents and reading and hearing about dissenting voices on specific projects and looking for conflict and hearing what the conflicting side is thinking, judging your thinking associated with that and seeing where there might be some holes in your thinking. Critical thinking protects yourself from confirmation bias. Confirmation bias is one of the most difficult things to break when you're doing value analysis, because then you start filtering everything through just your perception. It especially holds true for those of us who have a lot of experience. The more experience you have, the more you should be doing critical thinking, practicing your thinking techniques, getting yourself open to dissenting voices. I talk about this. I talk about the idea of writing fan fiction for different stories you might be hearing or watching on TV, or debating how characters are interacting, or thinking about what the next John Wick 5 should be if you're a John Wick fan, or thinking what Star Wars the 10 should be, or thinking where the Mandalorian is going to go next. I'm sorry, these are all kind of geeky stuff. Or, look at the Pride and Prejudice series. Oh God, my brain just fried. What is her name again? Person who wrote Pride and Prejudice. Someone can type it in real fast. I appreciate it. There's an unwritten, she had a semi-written work, and now PBS is creating a series associated with that, critically thinking about the work that she developed. Jane Austen. Thank you, Rebecca. Thank you. Thank you, Teresa. Thank you so much. Thank you, Jennifer. Oh my gosh. It was like, Pauline. I don't know why that was Pam. Pam loves Jane Austen. So we want to work on their critical thinking skills. Also, when we're getting into this level of enterprise and expert analysis, we have to start thinking about the system, not just the component. So how are things going to affect the overall system? What I like to talk about is that, and when you look at your thinking from a system thinking perspective, you have a tree, then you have a little grove of trees, then you have a woods, and then you have a forest. What might be good for the tree might not be good for the grove. What might be good for grove might not be good for the woods. What might be good for the woods might not be good for the tree. What is good for the tree might not be good for the entire forest. Oh, there it is. We're gonna rewatch it. We're gonna start watching it again on PBS. So thank you for that, Pauline. I appreciate it. So system thinking is you have to look at the underneath before you look at the top. I get very frustrated with this level of worker not planning their careers better. I get frustrated. You don't look at your careers as it relates to your beliefs, your values, what else you could be doing. You're anticipating where else to go. Most of us react when a career situation occurs and we're not prepared. That's not looking at our careers from a systems perspective. So we got to look at that total system in our understanding of value creation, especially as we're going to do change management and value creation. Because now you're getting back to most change management initiatives. Most systems are stuck in certain beliefs, and those beliefs are what has to be adjusted first before you can even go to the point of the behaviors and the actions. All right, it might be overused, but one of the frustrations is, okay, let's go off in the room and do a SWOT analysis. I really think that the key with SWOT analysis is giving somebody time to kind of think about it a little bit. Hey, I'm going to give you 20 minutes before we do this. I'm going to give you a half hour before we do this. Let's put down think about this SWOT analysis. Or maybe you're really good at, maybe you're a pessimist like me. So maybe folks go over there and do your weaknesses and threats. And you folks go over there and do the strengths and opportunities. And then you can counter look at each other. So you're not trying to think about the whole picture. It's tough for our brains to go back and forth between those two areas. We take a growth look, then we get to take a pessimistic or fixed look. But they are good because you get those things down. You can start seeing a picture, some consistencies. And I used to put points up against the ones that, if you did it in a group, the 5 people said this, or 5 people said something in this range. But the SWOT analysis does help you start seeing a snapshot based on a larger group. But the key for the SWOT analysis is giving folks time to actually think. You need the time to think. You're just not going to be magically saying, "Oh, There it is. I'm going to start. It's all in my head right now. Being comfortable with ambiguity is a critical skill for future state analysis as we're looking at value. Being understanding that there's unknown unknowns and trying to gauge what those unknowns are. There was a great Planet Money podcast about the blacklist for potential screenplays. And blacklist was actually a positive. It's a positive thing. And what they did was they screened associate executive producers started sharing their thoughts on the screenplays that were out there and rating them. And then sharing that, and you watch the trends and you realize that what was once unknown can become known based on information sharing. But you have to be comfortable with the fact that there are some unknowns so you can figure out ways to be able to dig into those unknowns. And then finally, with expert and portfolio value analysis, enterprise value analysis, these are things that aren't going to be decided with knowledge and information. These are things going to be decided with understanding and knowing how to get things done. At the understanding and knowing how to get things done level, whether it's face-to-face or it's live with Miro or Mural, those are tools for driving the conversation better. That's why I'm trying to do the chat. I do the chat with you to try to adjust the conversation, to maybe gather more information than my one-dimensional mouth can provide, right? And you folks can extend the mouth, can extend the information, and we get more effective communication that way. So realizing that when you're getting into this higher level analysis, getting more people together face-to-face or live over Zoom with a collaboration system that's not a barrier to entry, because some collaboration systems can be annoying in and of themselves, is part of a way of gleaning better information. From an influence perspective, you'll get this slide. I'm not going to go into it too much, but what I want you to realize is that when you start looking at enterprise analysis, you got to realize that you're ultimately going to someone to make a decision. Your goal is to get that person as much information as possible so they're not making a myopic decision, aka the demands I was talking about before. So you're influencing through the process and getting folks to see different perspectives. And influence can't be done by force. And influence must be done by a level of economics, and that's a separate presentation we can do. But as part of influencing or driving a specific enterprise analysis test or tests, you got to build your influencing skills. And finally, when you're testing, you have to talk about the bad, not the good. Bad news travels through an organization like a rabbit. Good news travels through an organization like a turtle. You have to meet bad news quickly, understand it, and communicate it. The better you deliver bad news, the more trust you're going to get. So future state tools, minimum viable product or process. You hear it all the time. You especially hear it in business value stewardship. I'm more apt to say I like it better when you're doing enterprise analysis, business value analysis, testing potential future state options. That's where you want to get into MVP or both MVP or process or product viability. So a great example for you there is as MVP as it relates to enterprise analysis. I would test a course through just a prototype. Wouldn't build the content, build the brochure, the marketing slides. I wouldn't even really announce it to the sales team. I would just send it out with our direct marketing capabilities to see what type of input I get. Then I'd have learning mechanisms to decide if it was the next step. That's a minimum viable. Another thing is if I might want to adjust and do a different business decision. So a minimum viable business decision will just be a product manager and associated product marketer going after that marketplace. They're being myopic. They're using some of the internal systems, but they're being myopically focused on their world and just trying to weave in and use services within the greater mothership. So it's not as impactful and they're not blinded by all the other stuff going on. That's a minimum viable process that could be possibly used for testing something out. So you want to be looking at it in a way that you could get maybe a smaller subsection of people to be looking at something, but then making sure they're digging into the capabilities of the organization. So one of those things is service design. It's a technique of collaboration. The principles of bringing both the users together, the system, what is the value, and then collaborating on that to start looking at things that you should be testing. And inside of that is the idea of design thinking. And remember, there are separate presentations associated with each one of these. I can't go too deep into each one, but anyways, as you're looking at analyzing at the enterprise level to bring in new things that might be worked on, service design is a technique. Each one of those comes with the concept of minimum viable. Design thinking is a technique. Designers want to bring everything into consideration. Designers don't really have a position per se. The best designers, they're designers, they don't know what else is going on. They're being given inputs. And because of those inputs, they're able to create. So you have to bring in all perspectives to do this appropriately. It's the idea that, the idea of when somebody, I think a blind person climbed Mount Everest. I mean, the amount of work that needed to be done to do that is a level of design thinking. You're bringing everybody's perspective together and helping that person do the work that they need to do. And of course, design thinking goes back to MVP from a process and from a template perspective for prototyping and validating. And both these really rely on an in-depth understanding of customer experience. So I would definitely tell each of you to spend some time outside of this understanding customer experience more. What does that mean? And how does that tie into internal projects? So we talked about design thinking perspective, and finally, lean startup. That's the one I utilized the most at ASPE when I ran that company. I like to say it was built on the bones of 1,000 failed course ideas. I had a certain level of metrics I was looking for. I had a prototyping system, and then I allowed those things to go out to market using my learning mechanism, and then reevaluating, reevaluating, and retesting before build or launch. This is really good externally, where design thinking, I think, is really good internally based on how they operate. So that's it for me. Questions, comments, thoughts, additional shares. I'm over by a minute. I do apologize for that. Very much so. Questions, comments, thoughts? You'll get the slides. You'll get the recording. You can share the PowerPoint from whomever you want to share it with. And I really appreciate your time. I hope you've got AKA value out of this. Learn some new techniques. I really appreciate all your time. Have a great rest of your day. Thank you all.